What happens when the most defiant regime in the Middle East wakes up to find its ultimate weapon completely neutralized? And what if the nation that disarmed them didn't even have to fire a single missile to do it? For decades, Iran believed it held the ultimate trump card. They believed they controlled the flow of the world's oil, but in a span of just 24 hours, the United States Navy executed a trap so quiet, so perfectly calculated, and so financially devastating that Iranian leadership is only just now realizing they have been completely boxed in. Before we go any further, if you are the kind of person who wants to actually understand the real moves shaping our world, instead of just watching shallow headlines fly past you, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel is built to break down the deep, hidden strategies driving global conflicts. And this story? This might be the most brilliant tactical checkmate you will see all year. For over 40 years, the entire power structure of the Iranian government relied on one thing: selling oil. Oil money pays the generals. Oil money funds the proxy militias. Oil money buys the absolute loyalty of the security forces that keep the regime in control of its own people. If that oil stops moving, the money stops flowing. And if the money stops flowing, the entire system begins to collapse under its own weight. Iran thought they were untouchable because they had a massive ghost fleet of tankers moving quietly in the shadows. They thought nobody could ever stop them without starting a massive global war. But they were totally wrong. Someone just flipped the entire chessboard, and the trap snapped shut before they even saw it coming towards them today. For as long as anyone can remember, Iran's ultimate threat was the Strait of Hormuz. It is a narrow strip of water that connects the Persian Gulf to the open ocean. Nearly 20% of the world's oil passes through this choke point every single day. For decades, Iran treated this strait like a loaded gun pointed directly at the global economy. Their message was always the exact same: if you push us too far, if you sanction us too heavily, we will shut down the strait. We will choke the global oil supply and send the world into an economic dark age. It was a terrifying threat, and for a very long time it actually worked. The fear of $200 oil kept the world hesitant. But threats only work if the other side believes you hold all the cards. This time, the United States Navy didn't play Iran's game. They didn't try to fight their way through the center of the strait. Instead, American forces completely flipped the script. They realized they didn't need to control the entire waterway. They only needed to control who gets to leave the dock. In a stunning move, the United States effectively placed a blockade specifically on Iran's own coastal ports. Every other nation's ships sail through the strait completely untouched. But the moment an Iranian oil tanker tries to leave its home port, it is immediately trapped. Iran built its power on the strait, but now they are locked inside. To survive years of punishing Western sanctions, Iran did not just surrender, they adapted. They built something the intelligence community calls the shadow fleet. This was a massive, decentralized network of aging oil tankers. These ships operated entirely in the dark. They turned off their tracking transponders, constantly painted over their names, and illegally swapped their flags to disguise where they were coming from. Their main smuggling mission was very simple: smuggle millions of barrels of discounted crude oil directly to buyers like China, while completely bypassing the global banking system. For a long time, this dark network was a massive success. It brought in billions of dollars of untraceable cash, keeping the Iranian regime financially alive when they should have been bankrupt. But a shadow fleet only works when it has room to hide in the open ocean. It only works when it can slip into crowded international shipping lanes and vanish among thousands of other commercial vessels. Here is the fatal flaw Iran never saw coming. You cannot hide a massive oil tanker when it is sitting right at your own loading dock. By blocking the coastal ports instead of patrolling the deep ocean, the United States Navy made the shadow fleet completely useless. A ghost ship cannot vanish if it is never allowed to leave the harbor. The very network that saved Iran's economy for years suddenly became sitting ducks, trapped in shallow water, totally visible, and absolutely paralyzed. Their financial lifeline was instantly and permanently cut. How exactly do you paralyze an entire nation's economy in a single day? You don't do it with a massive bombing campaign. You do it with cold, silent precision. The military execution of this blockade was a masterpiece of modern naval strategy. Over a tense 24-hour window, the United States military dropped an invisible net over Iran's most critical infrastructure. And the most terrifying part for Iranian leadership? It happened without a single missile being fired. Imagine being an Iranian port commander. You go to sleep thinking your shadow fleet is secure. When you wake up, the horizon is completely different. American destroyers have quietly positioned themselves in international waters just outside Iranian territory. Overhead, surveillance aircraft are circling, watching every single dock, every single crane, and every single tanker. If a ship tries to load oil, the cameras see it. If a tanker tries to detach from the dock and make a run for open water, a warship is already sitting directly in its path. The United States didn't invade Iranian territory. They didn't blow up the loading terminals. Legally and strategically, they did something much smarter. They essentially built a wall on the water. They dared Iran to make the first aggressive move. This tense 24-hour operation completely flipped the overall psychological advantage. For years, Iran loved to play the aggressor, harassing innocent merchant ships and staging dramatic hostage videos. Now, the tables were brutally turned. The United States Navy wasn't chasing them around anymore. They were simply waiting. The trap was set perfectly. The doors were completely locked. The Ghost Fleet was officially grounded. Iran went from being the neighborhood bully to being a helpless prisoner inside its very own home, entirely paralyzed by a massive fleet they simply could not fight or ever escape from today. Why couldn't Iran just use their famous speedboats to violently break the blockade? To understand this, you have to look at the invisible web of technology holding this entire operation together. For years, Iran's naval strategy relied heavily on swarm tactics. They would use dozens of small, cheap, fast attack boats to overwhelm a single enemy ship. It is a very simple numbers game. If you throw enough cheap drones and speedboats at one isolated target, eventually, something is going to slip through the defenses. But this time, they were not facing one isolated ship. They were facing an advanced American combat system that links every single asset into one massive shared network. Instead of each destroyer acting alone, watching only its own radar screen, the American fleet operates like a single connected brain. If a surveillance plane high above spots a tanker moving, every warship instantly knows exactly where it is. If one destroyer detects an incoming drone, that targeting data is shared with every other ship in the entire fleet, within fractions of a second. It is the difference between fighting one blindfolded guard and fighting a highly trained security team that shares a single mind. This technological web made Iran's famous swarm tactics completely obsolete overnight. You cannot overwhelm a network that processes threats faster than you can launch them. Every time an Iranian patrol boat approached the edge of the blockade zone, they quickly realized the Americans were already tracking them. They were locking onto their exact coordinates long before they even got into striking distance. The Shadow Fleet was grounded not just by physical ships, but by an invisible, impenetrable dome of data. There was simply no room left to run, and absolutely nowhere left to hide in the deep dark sea at all today. But the most terrifying part of this blockade isn't what Iranian commanders can actually see on the surface. It is what they know is hiding beneath the waves. While massive destroyers and aircraft create a visible wall, American attack submarines are quietly operating deep underwater. And here is the brutal reality that keeps Iranian generals awake at night. They have absolutely no way to detect them. Because of years of heavy sanctions and economic isolation, Iran's naval sonar and underwater sensor systems are dangerously outdated. They are completely blind to modern American stealth submarines. Imagine being the captain of an Iranian fast attack boat. You are ordered to approach the blockade line. You look at the American warships on the horizon, but you also know that a silent, heavily armed submarine could be sitting right beneath you. You cannot see it. You cannot hear it. But you know that if you make one wrong move, you will be destroyed before you even realize you are under attack. That deep, grinding uncertainty is a psychological weapon. It does not even need to fire a single torpedo to be completely effective. The fear of the unseen forces extreme caution. It creates intense hesitation, doubt, and panic inside the Iranian ranks. Sometimes, the most powerful military asset in the world is not the one causing massive explosions. It is the silent ghost waiting in the dark, reminding a hostile regime that they are entirely outmatched. They are totally blind, completely trapped, and helpless. This entire operation is not really about ships, sailors, or steel. It is about cold, hard cash. By freezing the tanker fleet, the United States Navy essentially severed the main artery, keeping the Iranian regime alive. Let's talk about the actual numbers, because the financial math here is absolutely devastating. Independent estimates suggest that since this silent blockade began, Iran is losing hundreds of millions of dollars every single day. Within just a few short weeks, those daily losses quickly stack up into the billions. That is massive wealth simply evaporating into thin air forever. But you have to understand what that oil money actually buys. It does not go to building schools or fixing roads for ordinary citizens. That money is the literal lifeblood of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It pays the salaries of the generals, it buys weapons for proxy militias spread all across the Middle East, and most importantly, it funds the internal security forces that violently crush any civilian protests inside the country. The Iranian government is a system built entirely on fear and payment. The clerics stay in power because the military protects them. The military protects them because the clerics pay them with oil money. It is a highly fragile and deeply expensive daily balancing act. When American warships blocked those ports, they didn't just disrupt global trade. They cut the financial oxygen to the entire military machine. This is exactly why a naval blockade is far more dangerous to Tehran than a massive bombing campaign. Bombs only destroy concrete buildings, military bases, and coastal radar dishes, but a financial blockade destroys the loyalty that keeps the regime standing. Without that massive hidden shadow oil money constantly flowing in, the entire power structure is quickly bleeding to death right now, in real time today. Behind closed doors, the panic inside Tehran is very real. You will never see it on their state television channels, but the foundation of the regime is actively cracking. When a government loses billions of dollars in a matter of weeks, impossible choices have to be made instantly. The clerics and the generals are staring at rapidly shrinking bank accounts. They are asking themselves a terrifying question: who gets paid this month, and who gets cut off? Do they prioritize paying the Revolutionary Guard commanders to keep them loyal? Do they keep sending millions to their proxy militias in Yemen and Lebanon to keep the regional fires burning? Or do they try to maintain basic food subsidies so their own starving citizens do not riot in the streets? There is no longer enough money to do all three. History has proven time and time again that regimes built on violent suppression only survive as long as the checks clear. The moment the security forces realize the money is gone, their loyalty vanishes with it. That is the ultimate nightmare scenario for the supreme leader. They are not just fighting the American Navy on the water anymore. They are fighting the clock. Every day those ships sit empty at the dock. The pressure cooker at home gets closer and closer to a violent explosion. The leaders are completely cornered, and they know time is rapidly running out right now for their crumbling empire today. They cannot escape this fate, at all. For years, Iran's ultimate safety net was China. Beijing was the single largest buyer of Iran's heavily discounted, black market oil. Whenever Western sanctions squeezed Tehran, China was always there to quietly hand over the cash and keep the regime breathing. Iranian leaders convinced themselves that this alliance made them completely invincible. They believed that if the United States ever truly tried to choke their oil supply, China would step in, flex its massive global muscle, and force the Americans to back down. But this rapid naval blockade just shattered that comforting illusion forever. Here is the brutal geopolitical reality that Iran is learning the hard way right now. China is a deeply pragmatic superpower. They love buying cheap, illegal oil when it is easy to smuggle in the dark. But they are absolutely not going to start World War III with the United States Navy over it today. When American destroyers formed a physical wall around Iranian ports, Beijing did not send its own warships to break the line. They did not threaten a massive global conflict to save Iran's trapped ghost fleet. Instead, they did what any cold, calculating superpower does. They simply looked at the blocked ports, turned around, and quietly started buying their crude oil from someone else entirely. Without China stepping in to save them, Iran is truly alone on the world stage. Their ultimate backup plan has completely failed. The realization that nobody is coming to rescue them is sending terrible shockwaves through the highest levels of the entire Iranian government. The highly profitable illicit oil trade is officially dead. The shadow fleet is rapidly rusting away at the empty docks. And the vital Chinese safety net has instantly vanished, leaving the regime completely exposed and trapped forever, without any more escapes left at all. If you watch Iranian state television right now, you will see a completely different universe. You will see highly produced, animated propaganda videos showing American warships sinking into the ocean. You will see military spokesmen standing at podiums, loudly promising that massive, crushing victories are happening every single day. But ask yourself a very simple question. Who are these cheap cartoons really made for? They are not meant to scare the Pentagon. Nobody in Washington changes their military strategy because of a flashy animation. Those fake videos are made entirely for the Iranian people. They are a desperate, loud distraction. While state media broadcasts fake digital explosions, ordinary citizens are walking outside to face the brutal, undeniable truth. They are seeing extreme power outages sweeping across massive cities daily. They are watching their life savings vanish as inflation completely destroys the currency. They are struggling to find basic, affordable medicine. The louder and more dramatic the regime's propaganda becomes on television, the more it reveals just how much raw terror they are hiding behind closed doors. A truly strong military does not need to invent fake victories with computer graphics. They let real, actual results speak for themselves. The massive disconnect between the lies on the screen and the rotting ships sitting trapped at the docks is impossible to hide anymore. The regime is now desperately trying to project ultimate power to its people, while the entire world watches them slowly suffocate under a silent, unbreakable grip right now today. So where does this actually go from here? What happens when a cornered regime completely runs out of time, runs out of money, and runs out of options? This is where the story gets genuinely terrifying. Right now, Iranian military commanders are sitting in underground rooms facing three impossible choices. Choice number 1 is to directly attack the American blockade using whatever drone swarms they have left. But military logic makes the outcome of that choice completely predictable. Sending cheap drones against fully networked American destroyers is basically suicide. It would fail instantly. Choice number 2 is to simply sit there, do absolutely nothing, and watch their own economy bleed to death. But hardliners inside the government would never accept that. Appearing weak in front of their own citizens is the one thing this regime fears more than an actual war. That leaves choice number 3. And it is the most dangerous option on the table right now. Will Iran attempt to strike the peaceful ports of neighboring Gulf states? Iranian officials have already threatened to do exactly this. If they cannot safely export their oil, they might try to ensure nobody else can export theirs either. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE sit right next door, filled with highly critical oil infrastructure. But if Iran actually follows through and attacks those neighbors, it would easily trigger a massive regional war. It would pull multiple powerful nations directly into an explosive conflict that would completely change the Middle East forever. Every single path forward carries the extreme risk of total destruction. A single mistake, one rogue commander, or one desperate missile could instantly turn a silent economic chokehold into a devastating regional nightmare within just a few short hours. The clock is ticking extremely fast right now for them. What we are watching unfold right now proves a massive, terrifying shift in how modern history is actually written. For decades, the world thought the next great war would be fought with massive explosions and endless gunfire. But the ultimate hidden truth is far quieter and far more brutal. Modern wars are rarely won purely through raw firepower alone. They are won by whoever completely controls the vital resources the other side desperately needs to survive. The United States Navy didn't need to flatten an entire country to strip away its power. They just needed to quietly drop an unbreakable net over its bank account. Control the money, and you completely control the regime. Iran spent generations proudly positioning itself as the untouchable gatekeeper of the global economy. Today, they are the only country on the entire planet firmly locked out of it. They spent billions building a threat that eventually became their own permanent prison. The loaded gun they once pointed at the world has not vanished. It is still there, but the hand holding that weapon has completely changed forever. If this video helped you finally understand the deep, hidden strategies shaping our future, that is exactly why this channel exists. Do not just let this critical information scroll past you. Hit that subscribe button right now. Share this video with someone who needs the full picture instead of the 30-second version. Never settle for simple headlines. I will see you right here in the next one.